with delivering for the American people. On the line, let's bring in New York Times chief White House correspondent and MS Now contributor Peter Baker. Our congressional reporter Mychael Schnell is at the Capitol as members duck out. And here with me, Democratic strategist and author of the Salty Politics newsletter, Julie Roginsky. Mychael Schnell, I am told that there is big action happening on Capitol Hill as it relates to the Leon Black hearing tied to the Epstein files. I want to get you in on this real quick, and then I want to free you up to go chase down Congressman Comer. Tell me how Republicans have been responding to the fallout from Trump refusing to sign this housing bill.
Yeah, well, Alicia, first it was this shock, right? And this surprise, pure surprise. This signing ceremony was set to happen. The stage was literally set. It was supposed to take place in Statuary Hall here on Capitol Hill. And then after the announcement had been made, there were even some members walking to Statuary Hall to take their seats. And reporters had told them, no, this signing ceremony was canceled. Republicans were thrilled that they had passed this housing bill. Again, widespread bipartisan majorities, more than 300 votes in the House and more than 80 votes in the Senate. It was a big win for them, and it came at a crucial moment. Republicans have been grappling with the economic message, with rising prices, rising inflation, largely due to the war in Iran, and they finally, many of them saw, they had a win on the affordability front. And once again, President Trump ripped it from their arms. They wanted to sign this. They wanted to go home, back to their districts, many of them in competitive races, and tout it on the campaign trail. But President Trump stopped him from being able to do that. There was a lot of frustration here, pure surprise and shock, not to mention the fact, Alicia, that White House officials had actually endorsed this piece of legislation. Nobody really understood why, especially when you bring in the point that this was all thwarted because of the Save America Act, which time and time again the Senate has proven there are not the votes to pass it and there are not enough votes to nuke the filibuster to allow it to go through.
Mychael Schnell, I'm going to free you up to go chase down Congressman Comer, but thank you so much for being with us. We're going to talk to Congressman Garcia just a little bit later in the hour about all of that. Peter Baker, when Donald Trump pulls a move like this, I have to wonder if folks inside the White House actually plan to win the midterms for Republicans or if they are planning to simply rule by executive action.
Yeah, you're not the only one wondering that. Even on the Hill, and Mychael knows this better than I do, but we hear Republicans say over and over again, does the president really want to win the midterms or not? Because he's not acting like somebody, like a president who wants to. He seems to be undermining his own party at every turn. The Iran war obviously has, sucked all the oxygen out of the room. It's made it harder for Republicans to talk about affordability, which is what polls show most Americans care about. Inflation is higher than when Donald Trump took office. The price of gas is higher than the president took office. And, this housing bill was one thing they could go out and say, hey, we're doing something about this. We're on your case. We're helping you out here. And he seemed not to care about that. Instead of arguing the merits of his policies through a housing bill like this, he seems intent and focused on changing the rules of the game in terms of who gets to vote. That's what the America Save Act would do and make it harder for people to vote. It means he's trying to change the electorate. Stephen Miller said that the other day in a tweet. He says, change the voters, change the outcome. And I think that's what a lot of Republicans on the Hill are frustrated about.
Julie, he is expert at changing the topic, and he has not been able to do that here.
Well, it's a little hard when people are actually going to the grocery store and seeing what they're paying, right? You can fool some people some of the time, but the problem is when you actually have to go and fill up that gas tank and you see what the price of gas is, nobody can tell you that you shouldn't believe your lying eyes, and you only have so much money, and you only have so much money to spend it on. And so the problem for him is I think he's gotten bored. I mean, I think governing is actually hard, and bringing down inflation is actually hard. It's a stubborn thing to do, and you can't do that unilaterally. You have to take into account what the Fed is doing. You have to take into account global prices. I mean, this is not something that he can wave a magic wand on. So I think he's just decided he doesn't want to focus on it anymore. And so when you have that kind of perspective from the President of the United States, you have things like this housing bill, which I think he's just not interested in. He's just bored by it. And because he's bored by it, he decided to torpedo it. And, it's not his problem. He's not running for election this year. So somebody else has to worry about it. And that's what the problem is for congressional Republicans right now. They have put all of their eggs in the basket of a guy who truly does not care about their prospects in November, just his own.
Peter, boredom from the president, plausible explanation. But I was going back through your reporting, and I was reminded in April you reported the Trump allies were questioning his erratic behavior, a conversation about mental health decline. Should we be thinking about the actions we've seen this week through that lens?
Well, look, he is 80 years old. He just turned 80. He is the oldest president ever to be inaugurated. If he makes it to the end of his term, he will be the oldest president ever to serve, even more so than Joe Biden. And we talked a lot about Joe Biden's age and health and the impact on his ability to perform the job. We're having that conversation now in a different way with Donald Trump. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but certainly age, I think, is front and center. You're watching him, seemingly less energetic. Right. He's falling asleep in meetings. He's not traveling outside of his bubble as often as he did in the first term. And he does seem to be acting erratic and impulsive. He just even more so than he has in the past. Now, he's always been somebody who followed his own whims, who did things that were unconventional and unorthodox and maybe unwise. But now it seems like certainly you hear Republicans say that he is, he's not fully there and that he's not making rational decisions, at least from their point of view, for the sake of the party and from their point of view of the country.
Julie, I don't know if you have noticed this, but the president keeps invoking Herbert Hoover. He did it when he was on stage at the G7. I thought maybe it was a fluke. He has done it since. I mean, of all people to bring yourself in contrast with, that's not normally the first one presidents go to. Which is especially interesting to me given this comment from Vance, which is I don't understand if he's trying to downplay what Nixon did, if he is acknowledging the reality of the ways in which Donald Trump has so wildly changed our standard for what is considered corruption and a departure from presidential norms, that now Nixon, not such a bad guy.
I think that this administration is deeply concerned, as all administrations are, but particularly this one, about standing and public perception and legacy. And I think his attitude, Vance's attitude, is let's take the two most reviled presidents of the last 100 years, Herbert Hoover, who ushered in the Great Recession, and obviously Richard Nixon, who was about to be impeached and clearly was going to be removed if he hadn't resigned. Let's take them and underscore that their legacies are tarnished by the same left-wing, woke, progressive media and institutions that are basically doing this to Donald Trump. So that if you think that Herbert Hoover is a bad guy, if you think that Richard Nixon's a bad guy, if you think that Donald Trump's a bad guy, it's all part of the same conspiracy by the same people to make them all look bad. And what's the common denominator? They were all Republican, right? So, look, I think that's where they're going with this. I don't think J.D. Vance is very good at this, to be blunt. I just don't think he just is not good at the job of spinning. Sometimes the truth comes out. We all know that secretly he has said, not so secretly, that he thinks Donald Trump is like Hitler. I mean, you can't lie 24/7 without the truth kind of spilling out. And I think part of this was kind of a tell from J.D. Vance to say, you know what, Richard Nixon was a crook, and so is Donald Trump. But the reality is the world we live in right now wouldn't be a big issue that Nixon did it. Not a big issue if Trump does it.
The problem with the Nixon spin, Peter Baker, is that any student of recent history knows it was Senate Republicans who decided that what Nixon had done was unacceptable. It wasn't some left-wing cabal. Your sense of why the vice president is suddenly invoking Richard Nixon?
Well, I think one of the things that he indicates here, in effect, is how much our political culture has changed, right?
Yes,
had Richard Nixon had the conservative media ecosphere and online, warriors and so forth in his corner back in 1974, he might not have resigned. And it might not have been that Senate Republicans would have felt compelled to make him resign. I think you could find plenty of Senate Republicans today who think as poorly about Donald Trump as Senate Republicans did in 1974 about Nixon. The difference is that they are afraid of Trump's ability to punish them in Republican primaries because he has a harder control over the Republican base than Nixon did in 1974. The atmosphere today is much more partisan. Instead of looking at a scandal and saying, well, did this person do something wrong or not, we look at it entirely through an us versus them lens. And the truth is, if you look at what Trump has been doing this last year and a half, it goes far further than anything Nixon did in many ways. I mean, Trump, is making hundreds, he and his family and his friends are making hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars from, sources that have an interest in what the federal government does and policy that he is setting. He has, taken a $400 million plane from the Arabs. He has used the Justice Department to go after his enemies in a much more overt way than Nixon did even back in the 1970s. The things that Nixon got almost impeached for, the things he was accused of in those articles of impeachment that passed the House Judiciary Committee, are a fraction of the things that you would see alleged against Donald Trump today, but the atmosphere was different.